many, and there lying in the road is what I think is the Styx Pride. I'm not 100% sure. There's 3 adult females and a couple little cubs curled up. There's some that are in the bush as well, but majority of them on the road. It looks like it could potentially be the Styx Pride. There was rumors of the Nkuhumas somewhere on Simambili, so I wasn't 100% sure who was where. So I just want to have a little proper look, but it does look like the Styx, just given that there is a few little mange scars, and these cubs are about the right size. In the Nkuhuma Pride, their sub-adults are a lot bigger than that, so I would imagine that it is them. So it was interesting because at first we thought we were on Tingana's track, but because they're so obscured and so sort of washed away, it didn't really look different to, well, one of these sub-adults didn't really look different to a leopard. So we kind of followed along, but as soon as VM said that there was more than one, and then we saw that there was probably 4 or 5 sets, I thought that this might be the case. I at first thought maybe it was just the Styx cubs that were walking around. I know that they've been left on their own for quite a bit, and they've been sort of having to deal with things by themselves, but as soon as you start to see cubs moving around as far as they have, then generally there should be at least one adult female around. Now, I know a lot of you have been very concerned about the fact that the cubs were left alone, and particularly the small little ones. There are some more underneath the tree just on the left-hand side. So underneath there is a few more little heads. Whether or not this is, the small ones are here, I can't see just yet. They don't seem to be that visible at the moment, so maybe they're just lying in a pile together, warming up. The nice thing is that we're going to have a beautiful sunrise, which hopefully will stimulate these lions to at least somewhat wake up. But how beautiful is that? Lions on the road, this pink sky coming up over the eastern horizon, and so it's as good as it really gets. Now, I have not seen the Styx Pride in the year that I've been at Safari Live in this area once. So this is the first time that I've actually seen them this far west. It's not to say that they never used to come this side. When I was at Chitwa, the Styx Pride used to go all the way to Simambili, so they used to move around quite a bit. So it's not a surprise that they kind of come through here, but it's just interesting to see how the movements have changed over the course of a year. The Styx a year ago were spending 99% of their time to the south of us and to the sort of east, so they were around in Koro, Cheetah Plains, those areas. Whereas now with the Nkuhuma Prides seemingly not interested in Djuma at the moment, it's allowed the Styx to start moving. Although something about them just doesn't look like the Styx. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because they're all kind of huddled up and curled. It must be them, but it's just I haven't seen them in so long that it's also kind of takes a few moments to try and work out who's who. But it makes sense, like I say, 3 adult females, and then the size of the cubs and also the scarring and the mange scars that they've got would indicate that it is them. Still a very nice surprise to have. I didn't think that we would get them this morning. You always worry when you're tracking cats in this particular section because they tend to cross over into Arathusa quite quickly from where we are. I mean, Arathusa is probably no more than, I would say, 100 to 150 meters from where we are, and so you end up in a situation where you often think that you might not get lucky with them, but as you can see, everybody is very, very sleepy, so the chances of them moving right now is very, very slim. Except, of course, if that sun gets up and it starts to get really nice and warm, then we might find a situation where they do start to move. But it's good that the lionesses are at least with the cubs. I'm hoping, because Steve saw all 10 cubs together, that the 4 little ones are also here and have been cared for and have suckled and are hopefully all feeling a lot stronger than when they were just by themselves for a few days. And I know a lot of you get worried about when cubs get left, but that's very common for lions to do. They often do leave their cubs in these sort of small groupings together, and they'll go off and then hunt and try and then find food for those little ones, because they are all starting to get onto meat now. Even the small 4, they will be looking for meat as well and be trying and kind of get some sort of sustenance. So it's a tough job as a mother, and it's a lot of hours that they've got to spend hunting. Also now in summer, hunting becomes quite difficult for the lions. The animals themselves, most of them have fed incredibly well, and so they're fitter and stronger and faster. There's also a lot more bush for them to hide in, and at the end of the day, the lion's camouflage is not quite as good in the summer months as it would be in the winter. If you look at that green grass in the comparison to their coat, it's not as easy for them just to disappear as they would in the wintry grass, which is that perfect tawny color. So it's a little tougher to hunt in the winter months. They tend to have a little harder time than in the summer months. Oh, sorry, they have a harder time in the summer months than they do in the winter. But like I say, everybody seems very sleepy at this stage. I would imagine it's been a long night. They haven't walked as far as I would have thought either, given that they were seen just on the southern side of Djuma, close to Shabamu. Chitty Chatty Meg, you're wondering if an animal gets mange, will they always be a carrier of it? Well, Chitty Chatty Meg, so every animal out here has some mange on them. So even us as people, those mites can potentially be on you, and they just are manageable if your immune system is good and you are, you're clean and those kind of things. And the same with the animals. If they look after themselves and they're feeding very well, then generally they are okay, and the mange will be under control, and naturally the body will be able to fight them off and stop these outbreaks. But as soon as it gets dry and as soon as they become in a compromised state and they're not getting the nutrients that they need, that's when the mite starts to overpopulate and becomes really quite a handful, and you find that they then get it really badly, and they can then, obviously, as we know from the Styx Pride, can suffer from it very badly. But as time goes on, so they'll try and kind of get that population of mites on them under control, and once that happens and they get good nutrition and good rainfall, then generally you find that they are able to deal with the small little bit of mites that they have on them. But they generally all have some sort of mange mite on their fur at some point in their lives, whether or not they've been badly infected by it or not. It's just when the conditions are adverse are good for the mange mite itself, is when you see these massive explosions of it. But yes, there will be carriers of it. If you look at Tinyo, he still has mange on his tummy, even though his body looks really good. He still has a sort of population of mites that are on his tummy, which is where this all started, is that the Styx Pride, funny enough, didn't really have mange prior to the Birminghams arriving, and Tinyo was the one that had it a bit, and then it kind of just spread like wildfire because the conditions were perfect for the mite to grow. Now what I want to do is I just want to try and maybe just position slightly differently, because that sunrise in the background is really very, very pretty, and I just want to see if we can maybe get the lions with the sunrise. I just want to see also if there's any more around. Let's just have a look. If we go this side, I just want to make sure I'm not going to go over a bush here and a whole bunch of little cubs are going to come squirting out. But let's see. So I was hoping that we'd get the sun with the lions, which is pretty much what we've got now. Although there goes one lioness, she's off and into the bush. They definitely could do with a meal though. It seems as though they all are fairly hungry. That lioness, when she stood up, is very skinny, so they would definitely do with trying to find some sort of food item. When we were driving down Zoe's Road, I saw tracks for a number of zebra trotting up the road, so I wonder if they maybe didn't try hunt zebra last night. At the end of the day, that's what they've got to be going for at the moment. Wildebeest and zebra are going to be this sort of staple diet for these lions, because, well, we still haven't seen the proper return of buffalo to this northern part of the Sabi Sands. While there are herds that come in every now and then, we still haven't seen, stable amounts of buffalo bulls that are in this area, and we haven't seen too much in the way of actual sort of hunting opportunities for lion prides. And so they're relying a lot on things like zebra and wildebeest and kudu and those kind of things, and that's not massive meals for so many miles. When you've got a lot of miles like this, it makes life a little bit tougher, and so you'll find that they're probably trying to kind of survive on impala lambs and things, and it's not really going as far as it should. Cheetah Raika, you're wondering if cats can get too fat from eating too much. I've never seen it in the wild animals, and the reason why is because it's never that easy. So even in that drought period, while they were killing a lot more than they would be now, and they were making kills almost, some of them were even 2-3 times a day, the problem with it was that those animals that they were killing weren't very rich in nutrients, and therefore, even though they were feeding a lot, they actually weren't gaining much out of it. So I've never seen cats get fat. When conditions are good and animals are really healthy and they've got a lot of fat, then it's really tough for the cats, because those animals are strong and they are healthy and they are able to get away from the cats a lot easier, and generally, like I say, vegetation is better, and so it becomes harder. But yeah, they don't get like house cats or domestic cats, and a lot of those cats, the reason why house cats get fat and often look like they are quite rotund is, one, because they do get overfed and they don't really have to work for their food, and two, because you have a situation where most of them are sterilized, and when you sterilize a cat, often that causes a body change. And if you go and look in zoos and in sanctuaries that keep lions that are on contraceptives or anything like that, they tend to be a lot fatter than the wild lions, and you find that their tails in particular, the base of their tails, get really big and fat, and so it's also to do with that. If you start to change their hormones and things like that, then they do put on weight. But out here, they have to work hard for their food, they have to walk a lot, they don't just kill everything that they hunt, and so even though they might feed well for 2-3 weeks and they'll look really round and big, then they'll go maybe a week without eating and their body uses a lot of that nutrients very quickly. But how sweet is that, the two of them just lying together? You can see the one on the back has got a bit of a mangled ear, so I would imagine that maybe, just maybe, that mange has caused a bit of a problem on that ear itself, and you can see it's a little bit bald there, and then the other one has got quite a bit of damage to it. Right, well, we'll sit with the Styx Pride and see if maybe the sunshine will begin to wake them and they'll start to stir and hopefully take us on a walk around as they go and explore Djuma. And while we do that, I believe Steve has got something that the Styx Pride would love to be eating right now. Well, not much has changed. Everybody's still very sleepy, and these two are about as cute as it gets. They've kind of got their heads together and using one another almost like a pillow, so they're fast asleep at the moment. I think it's been obviously a long couple of days for these little ones, and I'm sure they were hoping that when moms arrived back that there would be food. But interestingly enough, just now we had a gust of wind that blew, and all of a sudden all the females and a lot of the cubs as well put up their heads and really started to sniff. You can see the one on the right is doing it now as the wind is just starting to get up again. There's obviously something in the air that they're picking up. I wonder if maybe there isn't buffalo around, or maybe there's a male lion somewhere here that we just haven't found yet, because they really became quite sort of interested, and they spent a long time just staring into that southern section, noses to the wind, and just trying to pick up what was going on. Could also be that they are hungry, and so when the wind blows, they're just trying to see if there's anything on the breeze that they could potentially start to feed off. But at this stage, it doesn't look like there's really too much around. I haven't seen or heard anything, and so they don't look as though they're too active either. So whatever it was, it means that they're not really that interested in it. If they'd picked up the scent of something that they really wanted to go investigate, we would have seen them marching off into that area. What you also see is that they've kind of gotten off the road, most of them, and they're now lying in the bush. I'm sure they're prepping for the day ahead. They know the sun is starting to rise, and it should potentially then start to get a little bit warmer, and so start to make their way into the thickets where they can at least find a bit of shade. I'm surprised though, it's not exactly warm now. I would have thought that it would have taken a little while longer for them to start moving into sort of getting out of the way of the road. Maybe it's also just that the vehicles here that they've decided to start shifting a little bit, but one by one they kind of got up and went and lay on that side and have decided that the grass is maybe more comfortable than the road itself. But I haven't, like I say, heard any males this morning. Lions were very vocal last night. Just after our drive finished, there was lions calling and making really quite a lot of noise during the evening, and so I think the males must have been somewhere around, but maybe they ditched these females and decided to carry on. The Birminghams at the moment seem to be on a serious sort of takeover mission of the southern sections or central sections of the Sabi Sand, should I say. They've been seen as far south as Nkombi, which is way, way, way down in the south of the reserve, and that's probably because they're following that Kambula Pride, which is their offspring from the Salala Pride, well, descendants from the Salala Pride, should I say, and they've kind of moved in that area, and they've ended up dominating around sort of Mala Mala, Londolozi, and so that's dragging the Birminghams further south. And with the Majingalans aging the way that they are, it's no surprise that the Birminghams are just expanding their territory further and further. The interesting thing's going to come though as to what's going to happen, because soon we're going to see a situation where the Birminghams are going to be much like the Majingalans and the Matimbas and the Mapokos before them, where their territory just gets so massive that they're going to either end up splitting up, and which could lead to their downfall, or they're going to end up abandoning some of the prides up in this section, which is exactly what the Majingalans did, is that they were kind of in control of this whole area, and they just relinquished it without really being pushed out, and went all the way down to the central and western sectors to the prides down there, and then ended up just staying there. So I wonder if we're going to see a similar pattern from the Birminghams. I'm hoping not, because Birminghams, while they did bring about a mange outbreak in the form of, Styx and even the Nkuhumas, they have been really good for our lion prides in this area. We've had a positive growth of lions so far. A lot of the cubs have survived and made it to a fairly reasonable age, and I mean the Styx, these are still quite young, and if males did come in now, they would probably be a threat, but at least they're getting there and they're slowly growing. We know in the Nkuhuma Pride, those youngsters are developing nicely and are at the age now where they're probably about 6 months away from being okay if another male lion coalition came in. And so there's them. Then the Torchwoods have also got cubs. The Telematis, I think, have got cubs with the Birminghams. I'm not sure, it might not be, but at least the growth of lions here has been much better. It's been such a hard sort of last, I would say, 7-8 years for all of the lionesses around here. They've had to deal with a lot in terms of changing of coalitions, and they've really had a struggle to be able to keep their cubs alive. And so the Birminghams have been good for that reason, and I hope that they don't just leave now at this critical time and we end up with a situation where new males do start to arrive. The thing is, though, is that there really aren't any new males that are pushing in this area that we know of. We haven't seen any sign of young male lions coming into this area in the last little bit. So, Michael, you're saying because the Nkuhumas have spent very little time on Djuma over the last little bit, would the Styx now start to establish themselves on Djuma a lot more? Well, Michael, if you go back a few years, the Styx Pride were here a lot more than the Nkuhuma Pride. In fact, the Styx Pride used to be seen regularly on quarantine around Gowrie Dam and even further north than that. So the Styx Pride was the pride that was seen a lot more than the Nkuhumas. The Nkuhumas used to be much more up on this sort of Manuleti boundary with Buffels Hook, and very seldom used to come into Djuma. That all sort of shifted and changed when the Styx were pushed south, and the Styx movement south started to happen with the Matimbas and the Birmingham kind of takeover. When the Birminghams came in and the Matimbas started to move further south, so the Styx had cubs with the Matimbas, so they tended to hang around just to the south of that. Then I think you had a situation where the Nkuhumas kind of started to spend more time on Djuma, and being a bigger pride, that kept the Styx slightly more pegged to the southern areas. But now that the Nkuhumas have moved, so the Styx can start coming back into these areas and start moving around. But the sort of dynamics of lions within this area is absolutely fascinating. When I was here in 2012 and working with Chitwa, the Styx Pride was a very sort of big pride in one way, but they also a pride that moved a lot. They spent probably 50% of their time at least on Mala Mala, and then they would come up and come through and then on to Djuma and then back to Mala Mala again, and they even used to range as far as Simambili, like I used to say. But the pride that we actually saw the most during that period was the Silala breakaways, which is now the Mangen Pride. So those 4 females with the original tail is female, they used to be seen from Nkoro all the way to Elephant Plains and north into Djuma, south towards the Mala Mala boundary, and they just used to walk that corridor, and that was our most viewed lions for over a year. So they were the ones that were around. Now the Mangen Pride has completely left this area. They don't come up here at all. They now spend most of their time in Londolozi. The Silalas are down there, and so there's this kind of fluid movements that happen, and it's often linked to environmental factors as well as coalitions of males and who the females have mated with as to where they start to then spend a lot more time. So I think with the Birminghams kind of being so dominant now over this whole section, it's allowing the Styx and the Nkuhuma Pride to move a lot more and to range a lot more than what they were right at the beginning when the Birminghams first arrived. When the Birminghams first arrived, they didn't have a huge section. You also had a lot of competition from other male lions to the south and to the east and these kind of things, and so it kept the Styx and the Nkuhumas in quite a fixed area, and that meant that we didn't see the Styx coming into Djuma much at all. But now, because the Birminghams have taken over so much more and are expanding, it's allowing both prides to start venturing and to start exploring a lot more. Right. I don't think our lions are going to move just yet. We'll sit around a little bit longer and just see, maybe, with the sun up and a bit of a wind, it might get them going. But while we do that, let's go across to Steve, who has got a feathered friend that is not a friend of the lions. Well, I would imagine they are cuddly. Whether or not you would want to cuddle them is probably at your own peril, because the lionesses lying behind would be not very happy if you started to cuddle them. And I'd imagine actually even these little small, even though they're quite small for lions, would still be a handful if they've never had a human touch. I think they would be quite sore if you got clawed by them or bitten by them. Those paws are big already, and well, they've got quite sharp little teeth, but they are looking very cute, those two. I think they're a little bit on the cold side, so they're kind of cuddled up together, and then everybody else is just sprawled away on either side of them. Now, I don't see the 4 little ones at the moment. Apparently they were around with Steve yesterday, but just over here in this little bush right there is where there are a few more, and so I was thinking that the 4 little ones were curled up inside there with the rest, but they don't seem to be. It seems to be the middle sort of grouping of cubs. So while there are 3, I think, inside there might be 4 inside there. Those would be the sort of middle ones, and then you've got the bigger ones on my right hand side, which are the sub-adults for that particular grouping. Now, the one lioness does seem to have quite a nice, quite a big wound on her right leg. Not that it would be nice, but you can just see there's an open gash, so when she breathes every now and then, you just see it kind of coming out from behind that. Now, while that looks as though it would be very painful for all of us, and I'm sure it is painful for her, that is just a superficial kind of wound. If you compare that to the likes of the Nkahuma female who had that massive gash on her hip, and she's managed to survive, that will be something that will close up fairly shortly. But I'm interested to know what would have caused that. That's something that looks almost like a hunting injury. I suppose, with these cats, injuries like that are fairly common. They unfortunately spend a vast majority of their time going after big prey animals, and so they sometimes get dragged through bushes and hit stumps, and there's all kinds of things that can happen, as well as the fact that a lot of these animals, even things like zebra, are able to kick, and they sometimes then lash out and catch one of these lionesses like that, and so that's when you get small wounds like the one that you saw there. It doesn't look like a bite mark. Generally, when you get bites, you'll find little holes around that wound. So, Donna, I suppose snoring to a degree, I mean, they tend to be, normally when they're sleeping, either they're like this where they're quite quiet if it's cool, but if it gets very hot, then you hear them panting more than anything else. But I have heard a male lion kind of making some snoring noises from time to time. In fact, not one, I've heard quite a few of them. And twitching, most certainly. So they do twitch a lot when they sleep. You'll find both them and leopards, when they're lying down and sleeping, their paws twitch a lot and their ears twitch a lot, and even their coat to a degree. Now, some of that will be a response to the flies that they have landing on them. So sometimes around the ears and the faces, there's a lot of flies out here that will land to try and get moisture off of these animals, and so you'll find they twitch for that. But other times it's just because they're almost in a dreamlike state, and that's when you'll see the kind of paws moving as though they're running and those kind of things. So they do twitch quite a lot. Snoring, not so much. They're not as noisy as some domestic cats that I've seen. Some domestic cats seem to just go crazy, and I think some of it is also due to the fact that a lot of domestic animals, unfortunately, have been bred the way that they are, and a lot of them have issues with their sort of breathing ways. If you think of something like a bulldog and some of the species of cats, is that their faces are quite squashed up, and then breathing becomes a little harder, and that's sometimes when snoring starts to occur, or loud breathing, should we call it. And with the lions, obviously, that's not the case. They've got quite still an elongated muzzle. They haven't quite gone through all of that, and so they don't have to worry. Now, you can see they're just starting to lift their heads a little bit. I don't know if maybe something was moving around that stirred them. The little cub also started to look around. Maybe it's noticed that some of the other siblings are here, and is just staring into the bush and just checking who's around. But they definitely are, at least one or two of them, starting to wake up. The adult females, though, are completely fast asleep. You can see that female's gone back to sleep there. And so as long as the adult females are down and not moving, we're not going to see too much from the pride itself. The cubs are not going to go anywhere. They're going to stay with their moms in the hope that moms provide food at some point soon. So I think at this stage it's still going to be a fairly sedate start to the morning. It's also, I suppose, the grass is all wet, and maybe that's what they're waiting for, is a little bit more sort of warmth to come out, dry the grass a bit, and then they can start moving around. But they do look a little bit sorry for themselves, don't they? Shame, guys. Is it cold and wet this morning? At least they didn't get dragged too far, but they don't look happy, do they? Francis, you're asking why these lions look so hungry, yet they're not attacking us humans. Well, there's a very simple reason for that, is because as adult lions, they're not teaching these cubs that we're food, and then when cubs become adults, they don't recognize us as a food source. Also, we're a big object that's quite noisy, and so, you know, the lions, when they first see us as little cubs, are probably a little bit scared, and then they learn from their parents is that we don't hurt them, we don't take food away from them, and because we have a slightly different smell in the form of petrol and those kind of things, and you know, we have a clunky sound as we drive along, they just don't associate us with any type of food item whatsoever. Also, in the real world and in places like this, while lions are incredibly dangerous, you'll find that they don't see humans as a prey source that they can just go after every now and then. A lot of the fatalities when it comes to human and lion conflict and those kind of things is generally because lions are either being attacked by people, or you have a situation where lions have been surprised, and so they're either on a carcass or they've got cubs and they don't have anywhere else to go, and so they're just trying to defend themselves, and that's when they'll then lash out at people. But generally they're actually quite nervous of people and move away. But because we spend so much time here in the vehicles, from when they're a small age like these cubs, they learn that we're not a threat nor a food item because the adults don't hunt us, and so that's why we're able to sit close to them and they don't worry about us at all, which is quite nice. It certainly makes things a lot more comfortable. Right, now, so far this morning, you have seen myself and Steve. Unfortunately, the Mara team is experiencing a few technical glitches, and they've got a massive rainstorm, I believe, and Taylor's been flooded and all kinds of things. So hopefully the team dries out and everything goes well. But let's go back across to Steve, who I believe has got a nocturnal creature that has dug out some earth and should be very interesting. Still fast asleep, lions are still fast asleep, so what I think we're going to do is probably leave these guys now for a little bit. We're going to go and just explore and go and see what else is around, see if we can carry on with this Tingana story and see if we can maybe try and find him, and so we'll come back to the Styx a little bit later if we don't have any luck. But I think while they're still resting and still so fast asleep, it'd be good just to go and have a little explore around and just see what else we can find. So that's the idea. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Sorry, little one, did I wake you? There's one of them that's just looking at me as if to say, I'm so sleepy. How cute is that? So you can see how socially bonded these animals are, and why they, you know, maintain these prides is that they are often lying like this with each other and kind of right up next to each other, and that will all be part of this bonding process, even though they could sleep apart, and there could be a situation where they would lie away from one another. When they can try and cuddle up like that, it just helps not only with warmth but also just to get everything sorted. Right, let's carry on though and see what else. The lionesses are still all very sleepy, so we're going to leave them to themselves. There's definitely no small cubs here, so I don't know where they are. Maybe they're somewhere underneath one of these bushes. How many are in there? 3. So there's 3 on that side. Hey, little ones. Alrighty, there we go. So we're through without causing too much of a disturbance, which is good news. We didn't really want to wake the whole pride up. But the adult females look as though they couldn't care less that I've just moved through. They've kind of just popped their head up briefly and then decided to put them down again. Right. Wiem, where do you think we're going to find Tingana? Wiem reckons that maybe Vuyatela access area. Apparently he was last seen around quarantine, so I mean from there he could go really any direction. Normally though he kind of heads up towards Galago shortcut, that area, so maybe we'll go and have a little look around there. You never know with Tingana though, he walks so far. Now that his limp is all but gone, he's really able to go a long way again, and so difficult to find him sometimes, and particularly with this substrate that we're having to deal with at the moment, the lack of sort of soft soil, and the fact that it's rained has made it quite tough. Now you might be wondering why I'm off-roading, and well, that's because the elephants have done some damage on my left-hand side. They've decided that this road should be closed, and so there's a massive fallen over marula that is broken off. Now whether this was Ellie's or it was a storm, I'm not quite sure, because that is a seriously big tree in comparison to the size of even us. So if we go a little bit closer, you'll get a kind of comparison with the vehicle. You can see that it's probably, I would say, maybe 2 to 3 times the length of the car and very round. But what you will notice as well is if you look at the sort of base end of this tree, you'll notice that there's a lot of bark missing, and therefore it's allowed a lot of insects to get inside there and to start boring and tunneling through there, and it's exposed it to termites and wood boring beetles, and I think that's rotted that wood away. And so either an elephant's come along and pushed it and it's broken, or in these storms that we've had, there's been a massive amount of water which has weighed the top half of the tree down, and then with the wind and those kind of things, so it then breaks and falls over like this. But it's a shame, because it was a beautiful marula tree that is now going to be dead, and it looks like there was a perfect little nest in it. So if you look on this little section there, there's a little kink in the marula tree and a perfect hole. So I think there might have been a nest there for either a woodpecker or a barbet. They'll use those. Sometimes you'll even see woodland kingfisher using them, and you can actually see there's a little bit of white there as well, so maybe there's a little bit of dung from a bird. In fact, there's a little bit of dung from where a bird has been sitting. So somebody's nest, unfortunately, has also ended up plummeting to the ground, and that's not good at all, because that's not going to expose that poor nest to snakes and all kinds of other things that might be out here. Well, it's going to be a big cleanup job as well. Book lover, I haven't seen any golden orb webs around just yet personally, but I think Steph saw some in December, if I'm not mistaken, or Scott, one of the two of them. They saw 1 or 2 that were around, but none of the really big ones just yet. You know, start to see them more around sort of February, March. They kind of grow through the summer period, and then you start to really notice them in those times. But I would imagine after a bit of rain like we've had now, and you know, hopefully the insect life is going to increase dramatically, because it's been fairly quiet insect-wise over the last little bit, and so I'm hoping, you know, we'll start to see more, and that will then, you know, show the spiders a lot more as they come out and they feed and they start to grow. Hopefully they're going to get bigger and stronger and will be more visible. But so far I personally haven't seen any nice size orb webs yet. I haven't even seen the constructs of their webs yet, but I know that Scott or Steph, one of the two, managed to see some the other day, so hopefully they will be around. They are beautiful spiders. I know a lot of you might think I'm absolutely mad because I say that they're beautiful, but they are. They're incredibly rich in colors, and they're amazing animals, and the way that they build these webs is absolutely amazing, and the strength that the web has and the size, and also just the color of those golden strands in the golden orb web spider is absolutely beautiful. So I quite like them, and I think they're in a nice part of the bush. But if you are an arachnophobe, don't ever come on safari in February, March, because, well, you'll probably, don't know, commit some sort of horrible, heinous act to yourself out of sheer fear and desperation. I remember I had a lady once when we were following Shadow, and we were following her, and this lady was absolutely petrified of spiders, but unfortunately for her, she had booked at the worst time. We had hundreds of orb web spiders at that stage, and they were literally everywhere, and you could not go off-road without driving into the web of an orb web spider. And so anyway, we're following Shadow along, and she's a bit petrified, and I said to her, don't worry, these spiders won't do anything to you, you know, they're completely harmless, and if they are around, just don't worry about them and let them just kind of, you know, go, and everything will be fine. Anyway, we were right next to Shadow at one point, and she's coming quite close to the vehicle, and all of a sudden this spider, we hit a web, and the spider drops in onto this lady, and this lady just has an absolute panic attack. Spider goes flying that way, lady jumps out onto right next to Shadow. Shadow starts running off. My tracker is completely bewildered by what's going on, as is everybody else in the vehicle, and we had to then grab this lady before she kind of landed on top of Shadow, and then try and pull her back into the car before anything went too awry. But it was quite later, in hindsight, was hysterically funny. It must have been very funny from the other vehicle's perspective that was in the sighting, as this lady went just charging off the car, and spiders and bits of belongings were being thrown in all directions at that point. So there are people that are completely petrified of them, and shame. She was quite scarred by that experience, and she decided that a leopard would be a better option than this small, harmless golden orb-web spider that had landed on her lap and caused her to have a mild heart attack, I would imagine. In fact, actually, I've had some quite interesting panic attack situations, really. That one was one that was quite funny, and then I had one that wasn't so funny, actually, where we were also following the legend Mfufunyan, and he was kind of walking along, and he came from a sort of drainage section, and so I was going towards the drainage, and he then changed direction, and I was trying to back up against the drainage side of things, and as I was kind of going back, this woman just shouted at me that I was about to kill her, and she was this blood-curdling scream, and how can I drive so close to not only a dangerous cat, but also to a depth, well, this deep sort of drainage section where the bank could collapse, and that, you know, there's elephants around. And she then went into this massive panic attack where she literally stopped breathing for a while, and we had to kind of first aid her and try and kind of resuscitate her back, and then we decided that that would be her last safari for her trip, and that she should probably not go out any longer, because she will just unfortunately probably keel over and won't live any longer if she had to come across half the things we came across. So that was quite a scary one, and wasn't very, very nice at all, and a number of the other guests were quite shocked by all of this. Now, I believe a lot of you are saying that you would have chosen Shadow over the spider as well. I'm not so sure. Shadow's response was one of sheer shock, and she was much like the spider in that she just wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. And like I say, the poor spider, though, got flung about 400 meters. I'm sure that poor spider has never flown so far in all of its life, and it was probably just as surprised as anybody. And like I say, Shadow has just thought this must have been the weirdest thing, and kind of tried to run away as quick as possible. In fact, actually, we lost her after that. We weren't able to find her again. She then got such a fright that she decided she's not going to go anywhere near where we were. But it was that sighting in particular was hysterically funny. Jared's buddy, you say no wonder Shadow is such a grumpy cat. Well, I know, shame. She got frightened that day, but shame. She's not a bad cat, and she's certainly not the grumpiest that there ever has been, and she probably won't be the grumpiest that will ever have lived either. I find her, while she is a little bit tough to deal with at times. Sorry, there was a little cinnamon-breasted bunting that was bouncing around there that I wanted to show you, but it disappeared. While she can be a handful at times, I actually find Shadow lately has been quite wonderful. I mean, she's been very relaxed with us and has really not given us a iota of nonsense. Right, well, I'm going to go and see what else I can find and just kind of meander and try pick up some tracks for Tingana. And while I do that, let's go across to Steve, who seems to be continuing his feathered friend morning and has found himself with a beautiful specimen to show you.